So I am new to your teachings. You worked your way into my vortex in January, and I was, I'm going to take a breath, tiling my daughter's room and listening, and tiling my daughter's room and listening. My question, I feel, is much more practical.
They all are. It's perfect, so.
Okay. I want to talk about mom guilt.
Yeah. Well, we're just going to give you a basis of understanding that might take care of all of it. And that is that as a parent, your agreement is to provide an avenue into physical experience. And it was never to serve as the perfect guidance. In fact, the more perfect guidance a parent believes themselves to accomplish, the more they lure their child away from their true guidance of their own inner being, and the more we have to deal with them here later. And so, when you think about how many books and philosophies and theories have been written about perfect parenting and how different they are, you must realize that it's really a unique contract that all individuals have with one another, and that you cannot get it wrong, and that sometimes what you regard as the worst parenting, which means not taking hold and making demands, like breaking a horse, breaking your child of all natural impulses and desires so that they just conform to something that makes your life easier. That's what most people do in their parenting decisions. Most people who don't understand that everyone's here to create their own reality are selfishly, and that's all right, oriented toward their life going as well as possible, which means when you do that, I don't feel good, and when you do that, I do feel good, so here's the rules: do that and don't do that. And never mind what your life experience is leading you to, and never mind what your inner being is calling you toward, and never mind what path of least resistance your inner being is guiding you around, parents say. Just do what I say.
Okay, well, that's not me. But
we know it's not you.
Okay.
And that's why you feel guilty. We're trying to help you to not feel guilty about doing it a much better way. You've been doing it a much better way. A much, much, much better way by allowing more decisions. Most parents, if they could, would ride the bicycle for their child.
I'm happy to put them on the bus. But how do I balance this question of, like, I want them to follow their heart.
Yes.
And I present that to them. And I have a senior trying to make decisions about her life. And I'm like, go where your heart tells you to go. I can't fund it. You know, like, how do I balance the practical?
Well, this is another thing that happens
question
with most parents, is that not only do you feel like you should be the provider of the guidance, which you shouldn't be. It's their own inner being that will call them. But so many parents, even those who become aware of what we're teaching here and are well on their path to living it, still have believed themselves and somewhat convinced their child, just through life experience, that the parent is the vortex through which all of the child's well-being comes. And that's something that you can't keep up with, because it's not your job to be the open valve through which their desires are met. Everyone has a supply and demand thing. Their desires are summoning the energy, and they have to find a place of allowing or believing. And sometimes it's easier for a child to believe in abundance coming if they have abundant parents, or in clarity coming if they have parents that have clarity, or. But we would so much rather that an individual come to understand their own vortex and their own open valve and what it feels like when it's open and what it feels like when it's not, rather than relying on a parent. And do you know, nearly without exception, in fact, so close to not exception that we can say without exception, those children who have co-created with their parents in a way that their parents have been providers of all manner of things, including guidance and abundance, do their child a tremendous service, because the child is longer in discovering their true vortex and their true guidance. And almost without exception, in fact, without exception, that leads to resentment from the child. Because if anybody asks anybody else to be their open valve to their vortex, the best you can do is a terrible job. The best that anybody else can do in being your surrogate vortex is a terrible job. And so many parents still believe that it is their duty to do that terrible job, all along not realizing that they are preventing their child, at least for that time being, of ever looking to where the true guidance is and where the true power is. We're going to give you another very important way of looking at this. You came into this life experience for the satisfaction, for the joy of life. And the basis of your life is freedom. You're so free you could choose bondage. The result of it is expansion. That is inevitable. But your objective was that joyous, uplifting, satisfying life experience. Satisfaction comes from only one place. It's from me individually in my human form, through life, discovering a desire and then moving in the direction of that desire. Satisfaction is the closing the gap. That's what it is every single time. And that's why nobody feels any long-standing satisfaction when somebody else attempts to close the gap. Somebody wants something, you fill in, they don't feel any great satisfaction. That's why you call them spoiled or entitled, is because they're not buzzing over what you did for them, because the buzz is the joining of inner being, not the getting of the thing. The joining with the inner being brings the things, like the tuition or whatever it is. Helpful?
Yes.
Is your mom guilt lifting a little bit?
A little bit.
So that leads us to one more thing. You're new enough to this that this will be a meaningful statement. Guilt is what you feel like when you think a thought that your inner being isn't thinking. So when you say, I'm not a good parent because of this and this and this, since your inner being is not thinking that, you're hanging out there on the raw and ragged edge without the good feeling. There's a big gap between what you're offering vibrationally and what your inner being is offering in that moment in time. And you know how when you have the thought like, this kid is really onto something and she does shine and she has a determination that makes my heart sing. You know why that feeling of pride and upliftment comes to you? Because your inner being agrees with every bit of that thought. And then when you think a thought like, oh no, I haven't done a good job and that may jeopardize her outcome, you know why that thought feels so terrible? Because your inner being is not thinking that thought. And when you think a thought, she'll figure it out, you know why that thought feels so good? Because your inner being is thinking that thought, and so is hers. Helpful?
Yes. Thank you.